Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Brooke, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the Annovis Bio Investor Webcast. Today, we will discuss the detailed findings from our recent Phase 3 Parkinson's study of our lead drug candidate, Buntanetap. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that today's call may include forward-looking statements. These statements are based on current expectations and assumptions and are subject to risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to differ materially from those projected. For more information on the risks and uncertainties related to Annovis Bio's business, please refer to the forward-looking statements and the company's latest SEC filings. To guide us through today's presentation, I am pleased to introduce our speaker, Dr. Maria Macchiachini, the founder, president, and CEO of Annovis Bio. Dr. Macchiachini has been a pioneer in neurodegenerative disease research, and her leadership has been instrumental in driving the company's mission forward. Additionally, during the webcast, participants will see the Q&A icon in their taskbar. By clicking on this icon, you can type in your question and choose to submit it with your name attached. So without further ado, I will turn the call over to Dr. Maria Macchiachini.
Thank you very much, Brooke. And thanks for all the attendants to coming in this afternoon to listen to this talk. This slide just shows what we are going to discuss today. So some people, of course, would like to see how the study worked in the intended to treat ITT population, how we did the subgroups, how it works in the subgroups, how about the cognition in Parkinson's disease, the safety, and then finally clarification on what endpoints really do we need in Parkinson's, and what endpoints do we see, and what does the FDA want? So this is the study, just as a reminder. We recruited over 500 patients, and the key inclusion criteria were that they have idiopathic Parkinson's disease, and we recruited them by Horn and Yahr score 1, 2, or 3. We had a few zeros, we had a few fours. Also, we didn't want off time, so the off time was less than 2 hours. That means we excluded more severe patients. However, we have moderate patients in the group. The clinical outcomes were originally MDS-UPDRS 2+3, but the FDA told us to change to Part 2. So the official primary endpoint is MDS-UPDRS Part 2. The 2 Part 3, the 3, and the total went to exploratory endpoints. Originally, we wanted 150 patients per group in placebo, 10 mg, and 20 milligrams. And this is what we found and how we subdivided the populations. The intent to treat population includes patients that never finished the study. So we may have a 1 month in between analysis before they left, or a 2 months or a 3 months, but not the whole 6 months. So the ITT was 523 patients. The completers were 471, 9% dropped out. And here is what we did with the 471 patients. We put them into 2 subpopulations. One was patients that had Parkinson's disease for longer than 3 years. And the interesting thing was that we actually found that these patients showed hardly any change in MDS-UPDRS 2. I'll explain that later. When we took the patients that did have a change in UPDRS 2, we found that they also all changed in UPDRS 2+3, 3, and total. The next group we subdivided patients in were patients with postural instability and gait difficulty. These patients progress much faster than the other Alzheimer patients, and we figured, well, maybe it works in them better. In fact, it did. It works a lot better in the patients that progress faster than in the patients that progress slower. And finally, we looked at cognition. This was an exploratory endpoint. We really didn't, we didn't know what to expect. We know that cognition can be bad in Parkinson's. Some Parkinson's patients suffer from cognitive decline, most don't. We found that 88% did not, but the 12% that did improved substantially. So here is the data. This is the ITT population before subdividing them into the groups. And if you look at UPDRS2, you see that it pretty much doesn't move. The total ITT population does not change at all in UPDRS2. And if you remember, I said that only the patients that have a deficit in UPDRS2 show improvement in II+III and Total. Now, the UPDRS3 part in the ITT population looks pretty much identical to the ITT population in our Alzheimer's patients. Everybody improves because that's what we see. We had high placebo, we had good response. -3 is excellent response, but the placebo also has -3. That's exactly what we saw in the ITT population for Alzheimer's. So we knew that in the part 3, we had to figure out which group worked. And in the part 2, we had to figure out who has a deficit. And that is exactly what we did. If we take patients that have a part 2 deficit, you show that here in the very, very first diagram, you see that the patients we took in part 2 with more than 3 years of diagnosis had a deficit. They improve in part 2. The same patients that have this deficit in part 2 improve in part 3. The same deficit improve in part 2+3, and the same patients improve in total. This shows that our selection by UPDRS2 was a lot more successful than by Horn and Yahr. In fact, let me go back, and I'll get back to this later. Horn and Yahr did not give us any subdivision that was useful. And then we go to the patients diagnosed with postural instability and gait difficulty. And again, we see that in this specific case, these patients may or may not have a deficit in part 2. In fact, they are found all over the scales from Horn and Yahr 0 to Horn and Yahr 4. And it doesn't matter whether they're early or advanced. They have postural instability. These patients improve a lot, be it in part 2, in part 3, in part 2+3, or in total. I want to point out that in the other patients, we saw changes of 3-4 points. Here we see enormous changes. And we had a few patients that came in on walkers and walked out without. And we thought they were cheating. They were just showing they have Parkinson's, but really didn't. But if these patients, and in fact, we looked, these patients belong to this group, then their data is real. They actually walked in on walkers and walked out without. And so we know that postural instability and gait difficulty responds very strongly to our drug. Now, I'm giving you a little background here that patients can be subdivided into postural instability and gait difficulty, but also into tremor dominant. In the tremor dominant patients, we saw that they respond, but not nearly as well. So we want to go back and see what makes them tick. Because what we are learning is that we can't go by Horn and Yahr scale. We have to figure out what does this drug improve in what patients. And we have a long ways to go because it took us a little while to figure out that we had to first find a deficit and then see how that deficit gets improved. So then we went to MMSE. This was an exploratory endpoint, but interestingly enough, we saw that the whole population as I was saying, most Parkinson's patients don't have cognitive decline. So the whole population shows a very minor cognitive decline. However, when we took the population that has a cognitive decline, which is 12%, they declined 1.5 points. And if you look at Alzheimer's, 3 points or so is the average, 2 to 3 points is the average decline of MMSE in an Alzheimer patient. So these patients behave more like Alzheimer patients. And in fact, if we give them our drug, they improve. Okay, here we prevent the slowing, we stop the progression in the whole population, but in the affected population, we improve cognition. I want to point out that MMSE 20 to 26 is exactly where we saw our activity in Alzheimer patients. In Alzheimer patients, we saw that our drug worked in 1 month at MMSE 20 to 30, at 3 months at MMSE 21 to 24, and here, if we add Parkinson's, at MMSE 20 to 26, which means our drug improves cognition at MMSE stages more than 20. So this is very interesting because while these are Parkinson's patients, we can use this data to substantiate our Alzheimer's data. And we can also help Parkinson's patients not progress in dementia or to dementia. The drug is safe. You have heard me say this now for everything and everybody. In fact, it doesn't matter how we look at it, whether we look at treatment-related adverse events that are just treatment-related or potentially drug-related, we have the exact same percentages, be it in placebo, 10 mg, 20 mg, or combined. In serious treatment adverse events, we see absolutely none, neither in placebo, nor in the high group, nor in the low group. So the drug is safe. We have now way over 1,000 patients treated from between 1 day and 6 months. And we are putting together a data safety base for the FDA, but the drug, we are 100% sure, is safe. That's one thing that is true for all our treated patients. So this is where the state of Parkinson's disease is. I showed this for Alzheimer's, but I'm showing the same for Parkinson's. An untreated person or a person on placebo will decline in whatever function that they're most affected with over time. In Alzheimer's now, we have Leqembi, which is disease modifying. Actually, as of today, we have Buntanetap. They're disease modifying. They slow the disease. They don't improve. And then in Alzheimer's and in Parkinson's, we have symptomatic drugs. Every single drug approved for Parkinson's to date is symptomatic. It's mostly dopaminergic based, and it improves cognition, and then it slowly goes back down to where the patient would have been if they never took any drug. What our drug does, as far as we know, it improves whatever scale, be it UPDRS 2 or 3, it improves it above what the existing dopaminergic drugs do, because we gave it on top of the dopaminergic drugs. And then we don't know how it progresses long term. Up to 6 months, where we have up to 6 months, we know that it stays up here. We see 0 downhill slope, and at some point, maybe it will start to go downhill, but at this point, we really do not know yet. So we know our drug is better or as good as the existing dopaminergic drugs, but improves the effect of dopaminergic drugs by double. And long term, we hope it stays up there. So where do we go from here? We will summarize this data and submit it to the FDA and ask for a meeting in October. And at that meeting, we want to ask to file an NDA here. I'm not putting it in writing because it's aggressive, but it's not that aggressive because the drug works in the whole ITT population. We just have to use different measures to find how it works. So we will ask for an NDA here. If they say no, we will start an 18-month study and break it off with an interim analysis at 6 months to confirm that it has symptomatic effect, and then continue for 18 months so that we can also show disease-modifying effect. We will also have an open label study for all the patients that have already participated in a study so they can get the drug going forward. I've had a lot of patients asking for that because they felt better on the drug. Now, if we talk about FDA in general, with this study, we really also add data to our Alzheimer's disease program, because we can say now that in Alzheimer's, we have cognitive improvement at 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months. And in Parkinson's, we can say that our drug works on every patient in the Parkinson's population, even though we may need a different scale to measure that. And I think there is one more thing I wanted to mention. We have it in the news releases. How about the endpoints? As most of you know, or some of you know, we started out with UPDRS 2+3. I want to point out that Denali and Cerevel on clinicaltrials.gov also have 2+3. The reason for that is that if 2 and 3 are good, 2+3 is better. You put two good things together, you get additive value. So we all felt, and I can talk here for Cerevel and Denali, we all felt that we would get statistically significant data. Then the FDA told me, I'm not sure what they told anybody else, but they told us, don't use that. It's not an accepted endpoint. Use 2. And the reason they said use 2 is that they feel that when patients tell in their words how they feel, how they work, how they function, how they clothe themselves, how they eat, it's a better scale to measure progress for the patient. Maybe not for the PI, but for the patient. Whereas the UPDRS-3, it's the PI telling you how much do you shake, telling you walk a little bit and watching you walk. So we changed to UPDRS-2. And honestly, I was scared because in our phase 2A, we did not have statistical data in UPDRS-2. We had highly statistical data in UPDRS-3. But once we figured out how to analyze Buntanetap, we found that it works in UPDRS-2 just fine. It works beautifully. And it works in 3. And then even though the FDA doesn't like 2+3 for you guys, we did 2+3 because that was our original endpoint. And then we also did total. So that's it. Thank you very much. Now we want to move to question and answers.
Thank you, Dr. Maria Macchicchini, for that insightful presentation and for sharing the exciting findings from your phase 3 Parkinson's study. Like you mentioned, we will now move to the Q&A portion of the webcast. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that if you have a question, please use the Q&A feature in your webcast interface. We will do our best to address as many questions as possible within the remaining time. Now, please give us just a moment as we queue you up the questions, and thank you for your patience.
Okay, so I'm back, and I want to introduce Andrew Walsh. He is our VP of Finance, and he's going to ask the questions or take the questions and pass them on to me. Now, while he is looking at questions, let me answer a question that several investors and patients have asked me this morning. I got several emails that said, if the data is this good, why is the stock so bad? And that's an excellent question that I've been asking for 2 years. I thought the data was good with our phase 2A data, but people didn't think so. So we keep going. We produce phase 3 data. Alzheimer's wasn't well accepted. We keep going. Now we have excellent phase 3 Parkinson's data. And slowly the street sees it. See, we are tiny. When we went public, we had 2 people, 2, just me and a chief financial officer. And we survived. And then we are much bigger. In fact, we are 12 people, and you'll see in a little bit, we're hiring another 4. So we're getting there. But still the question is, pharma is so big. They have so many scientists, so many PhDs. Why would Thinky Little Us know? Well, partially we were lucky. Partially we persevered. Partially we saw what other people didn't see. This drug has been looking good ever since I did animal studies. Trust me, if the animal studies didn't look good, I would not be sitting here. And finally, we are getting to the point where we can say, yes, the drug works in Alzheimer's, and yes, the drug works in Parkinson's. And really, I hope the FDA is going to see it our way. But I do know that a lot of scientists in the meantime see it our way. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Just bear with us, and I will start reading some questions. I know a lot of have flooded in already, so I will try and take them in some semblance of order. Maria, I think I wanted to start with maybe a patient-centric question, just because I know we've gotten a lot of outreach from patients today. One common question is, will we be including existing trial participants into future open label studies? And then if you just want to expand on the open label question in general and our plans for that.
Yes, that is an excellent question. And I wanted to have an open label study a long time ago, because I really think that people that enter our studies and spend their time and their effort and believe in the drug and feel better, they feel better. A lot of us have said they feel better. They should have the right to continue on the drug. So we plan to have our FDA meeting for Parkinson's in fall. We plan to submit our plans, and we will also submit an open label study starting Q1 of next year. That open label study will take all participants, be it for Alzheimer's or for Parkinson's. We will test them in the beginning, so we see how they have progressed from when they stop the study to how they start. And then they get pills for 6 months, and they come in every 6 months until the drug is on the market. So yes, absolutely, first quarter of 25.
Okay, so next question, which I thought might be relevant, is what is your belief currently for how the results now, both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, may impact our ability to pursue other cognitive disorder indications in the future?
Well, I've been saying forever that Buntanetap works in everything. It works in animals. And I hate to enumerate it because we have 10 different animal studies and it works in all of them. So theoretically, yes. The lowest hanging fruit is probably Lewy body dementia or Parkinson's dementia, which is kind of similar. Both diseases have Parkinson's with early dementia. In very late Parkinson's, most Parkinson's patients will show dementia, but they have dementia just when they start shaking. And really, those diseases are much worse because they're combining Alzheimer's and Parkinson's in one person. In the brain, you find plaques, you find tangles, you find Lewy bodies. So the lowest hanging fruit is definitely a 6-month study in Lewy body dementia, yes.
Okay, another topic which has spanned multiple different types of questions is just your thoughts on fundraising and what will be needed to pursue the 18-month trials that you discussed during your talk.
So one of the very interesting things about this company and nobody believing in it, that doesn't mean that nobody's listened. A lot of pharma companies have been kicking tires because they want to be informed, but everybody is waiting for better data. And the phase 2A wasn't good enough, the Alzheimer's wasn't good enough, the Parkinson's may be good enough. But if and when the FDA tells us we can file an NDA, I have a lot of people, interested parties, be it in the banking side, being in the royalty side, being in the partnering side, that will come in. So I'm not really worried about raising money. Besides, Andrew here has been raising money continuously. We have $4.3 million in the bank right now. And that money is not just for survival. That money is paying for 23 kilos, that's 55 or so pounds of Buntanetap for the phase 3 studies. We are doing we are doing the radioactive work in humans. We did it in rats. It looked good. We waited to do it in humans because it's an expensive study. You give a lot of radioactivity to people, which I really don't like. I mean, but you do what you have to do. And we waited to see if we would actually go to another study and we would go to the NDA. It has to be done before the NDA. And at the same time, we are really quite comfortable right now. I know everybody wants us to have a few $100 million in the bank. We don't have that. But with the FDA allowing us to go into NDA, a lot of the people that are sitting on their hands are going to move. And at this point, we are doing quite well.
I think this is probably another patient question. If patients participate in the trial, when will they find out, whether they got the drug substance or not?
Tonight. Okay, so Sarah is sending the unblinding sheet tonight to all the sites. So keep bugging the sites tomorrow.
Another question surrounding kind of stock price and funding, and this is a fairly common question, and I'll just ask one version of it, is kind of what is your view, Maria, for how we plan to kind of combat some of the misinformation more generally just online and everywhere else about the data and our plans, et cetera?
Yeah, that is a good question. I understand people want to make money. Okay, everybody makes money and it's free speech and you can say whatever you want. But shorting us make some people money. The truth is this drug works. This drug gives people hope. This drug improves quality of life. This is all I wanted to do. And people just bash it so they make 10 cents. So maybe they make 10 million. I'm not going to argue how much they make. I just find, because their reasoning is that they make sure nobody cheats. But it's not about cheating. I'm not cheating. I'm being very honest. I just think this drug deserves better. And there is really not much I can do. I think we are getting more active in explaining things to people. We're getting more active getting out there. The reality is that with more people, I have more time to do that. And I want to dedicate more to tell people what we're doing, how we're doing it, what is good about it, how it differentiates us from other people. But in the end, I really want to ask short sellers, do you have a grandmother and a grandfather? Did you ever think about that? Anyhow, that's my take.
Okay, so another funding question that's a little bit of an offshoot, but I think is probably a good question for us to cover is, do you think the NIH may provide, any grant opportunity for both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's given the recent data that we've released?
Yes. That's a good answer. Yes.
Okay. Another question, just touching on a little bit of what you mentioned already, Maria, but just your thoughts on, potential partnerships or kind of what your view is going to be in terms of potentially partnering with someone for the 18-month studies and how that intersects with what you discussed for financing needs.
So there are two ways of partnering. And honestly, at this point, I have not made up my mind. If somebody offers enough, they can have everything. It's not quite. I want to be in charge of clinical trials. I think we have done a fantastic job. I want to keep that doing, but they can have the company. However, the reality is that nobody's going to offer a ton. They're going to offer decent, but so what's probably easier to do is to partner with a country and then do a joint venture in that country. So for instance, if we have a joint venture with Japan, they would do a phase 3 in Japan. We would do the same phase 3 in the United States. We can do the same with China. We can do the same with, probably not Russia, but with a country in Europe or a country in the, whatever, okay, I can't be too specific. So that is the low-hanging fruit. That would not, in that case, we would not sell anything. We would just give away one country and do a joint clinical study in that country.
Okay. I know we've already covered this a bit, but I've seen quite a few questions. Do we maybe want to just revisit the discussion around plans for NDA and your view of the FDA and their potential feedback as we look towards the meetings that we're anticipating? That I know we talked about that already, but I've seen quite a few comments on that in the last few minutes.
I have changed my belief in what we're going to ask the FDA. With the fact that we figured out that every single individual in the Parkinson's population is affected by the drug in a positive way, I think we're going to ask for an NDA. That NDA will not cover disease modification. It will not cover 18 months. It will cover that on top of dopaminergic drugs, the drug improves, and we can mention 3 functions that we were going to measure, okay, including cognition. And that's great, because we are not saying we are not doing another study. We are just saying we want to get it out of the market while we do another study. That doesn't hurt anybody because the drug is safe. It doesn't put anybody into any kind of difficult position, not even the FDA, because the drug is safe. And at the same time, it allows patients to get to the drug faster. Because while in the United States, there will be an open label study, there won't be one in Slovakia. And I had several people from the Eastern Bloc tell me, when do we get it? From Portugal, when can I have it? From the Arab Emirates, when can I have it? Or from South America. And there is no way to get it there other than having it approved by the FDA, and then they translate it and license it for their country.
I think this is an interesting question and a good one. One individual asked, what can we do from the general public side to kind of advocate for this drug? I know that we've been hearing a lot from patient advocates and patients today, so I was curious if you had thoughts on, how folks that are on this webcast or their friends and family can, help get awareness for the drug compound and what we're trying to do here.
That's such a very kind offer. And I have to be honest, I thought of patient advocacy. I think one of them is on the talk. We will take patient advocacy to the FDA, because asking for an NDA at this stage is aggressive, even though we can justify it. So we will have a group, and maybe you can participate. I think that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to take maybe one more question?
Sure, we have time.
Okay. I think one more that I don't think has been asked that's good is if you want to discuss the participant rates, dropout rates, kind of how that unfolded as the study went on.
So we had extremely low dropout rates. We expected 25%, we had 9%. And that's kind of similar to Alzheimer's. We expected 25. Now, it's a shorter study in Alzheimer's. We expected 25%, we had 5%, but that was at 3 months, whereas this was at 6 months. So our dropout rates are way below the standard of what people expect. And the reason is there are no side effects. Plus, people may feel better. We didn't really measure depression, anxiety, but the fact that UPDRS2 shows a change in the people that have a disease or a problem shows that they do feel better. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Maria.
Well, thank you very much. That's it then for the questions, and I pass it back to Brooke.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for your thoughtful questions and for participating in today's webcast. We appreciate your engagement and interest in our work at Annovis Bio. A special thank you, Dr. Maria Macchichini, for her insightful presentation and for sharing the promising findings from our Phase 3 Parkinson's study of Buntanetap. As a reminder, a replay of today's webcast will be available on our website shortly. If you have any additional questions or need further information, please don't hesitate to reach out to our investor relations team. Thank you once again for joining us, and we look forward to keeping you updated on our continued progress. Have a great day.
Goodbye, good night.